Today, there are a lot of people who make the claim that the reason we see so many school shootings is that we have strayed away from being a Christian nation. That if we would just put God back in schools, we wouldn't see any more of these events. They claim that we never saw any of these events until we put a wall between education and Jesus. And a lot of our elected officials seem to believe this too, such as Kim Daniels of Florida, who following Parkland said that we can solve school shootings by passing a bill that puts "In God We Trust" in schools. But is this rhetoric accurate? Did we not have any of these events before we started removing God from schools? Well, to understand that, we have to go back in time to right before the Revolution. The first documented school shooting in the United States occurred on July 26, 1764, near Greencastle, Pennsylvania. And this event is known as the Enoch Brown Massacre. Now, before I go into what happened, we need a little context. So let's go back just a few months before this event happened. So a lot of the colonists of Pennsylvania at the time really wanted to be able to push westward and expand their holdings and increase their wealth. There was just one problem. The British had just signed a treaty with the indigenous peoples on October 7, 1763, to prohibit westward expansion. This treaty was meant to ease tensions between the colonists and the indigenous people. The indigenous people were tired of the colonists pushing into their sacred areas, pushing into their hunting grounds, and they didn't want to secede any more land to them. But that treaty didn't really sit well with a lot of the colonists, and they were like, we're still going to push westward. And the indigenous people probably responded with, to hell you are, don't make us build a wall to keep you off our land. Regardless, they were not happy that the colonists kept pushing westward. Now, while we don't know what exactly was said between the colonists and the indigenous people, what we do know is that tensions continued to get worse and that conflict continued to escalate. And at some point, Pennsylvania Governor John Penn had had enough. Sometime in November or December of 1763, he made the offer that he would fund war crimes against the indigenous peoples around Pennsylvania. He promised to pay a bounty for each indigenous person who was horrifically removed. And sadly, some of the more sociopathic colonists saw this as an easy way to make money, and one such group that took Penn up on his call was a mob of settlers known as the Paxton Boys. It's said that they were responsible for the complete massacre of the Conestoga tribe. At the time, the Conestoga only consisted of about 20 people, that's men, women, and children. And the Conestoga had remained neutral throughout all the conflict. Instead of fighting with the colonists, they traded goods and services to them for clothing and other things they needed. Unlike other indigenous groups, the Conestoga were used to colonists coming and going from their town. So when the 50 members of the Paxton Boys showed up, the Conestoga were not prepared for the horrors that were about to be inflicted on them. Now, I'm not going to go into the specific details of what the Paxton Boys did to the Conestoga tribe, but suffice it to say that they brutally unalived every man, woman, and child, and they horrifically desecrated all of their remains. Now, upon learning what happened in Conestoga Town, a lot of people in Philadelphia were rightfully pissed off, especially those who had been trading with the Conestoga Town. And they saw it as more savage than anything that the indigenous people had done to the colonists. And among those who were really pissed off about the entire event was this guy. In his work, Narrative of the Late Massacres, Benjamin Franklin wrote that the Conestoga tribe would have been safe among any primitive people on the planet except the Christian savages of Pennsylvania. But the Christian colonists were not the only group to be really pissed off about what happened at Conestoga Town. And this is what's going to bring us to the first recorded school shooting in the U.S. The Lenape tribe had seen the horrific things that had been done to the Conestoga tribe members, and they wanted to get justice. And so, 4 members of the Lenape tribe began to seek justice across the state of Pennsylvania. And in true eye for an eye mentality, they also targeted men, women, and children just like the Paxton Boys had done. And one of the targets was a schoolhouse located just outside of present-day Greencastle, Pennsylvania. 11 people would be unalived in this event, including the school's headmaster, Enoch Brown, and 10 of the children that were in his care. One child, named Archie McCullough, survived, and that's how we got an account of this event. And unfortunately, this only made things worse between the indigenous people of Pennsylvania and the colonists there. After the Enoch Brown School massacre, the governor of Pennsylvania, John Penn, issued another decree increasing the bounties being paid. Today, there are memorials for both Conestoga Town and the Enoch Brown School. But unfortunately, this is a horrific piece of American history. And unfortunately, it kind of highlights that these types of events are just part of the fabric of America.